Some ghosts are said to haunt houses. Others are said to haunt roads, forests, and abandoned places. But every now and then, there is a legend so powerful that it seems to haunt something much bigger than that. A region, a culture, even an entire city. And across Indonesia and the Malay world, there is one ghost that has done exactly that. In Indonesian folklore, she is known as Kuntilanak. In Malay tradition, she is often called Pontianak. She is usually described as the spirit of a woman who died while pregnant or during childbirth. A pale figure in white, with long black hair, often associated with eerie laughter, soft crying, and a presence that feels wrong the moment it appears. For many people, she is simply a terrifying ghost story. But when you look deeper, this legend begins to feel like something more than just horror. Because the story of Kuntilanak, or Pontianak, is not just about fear. It is also about grief, womanhood, death, and perhaps most strangely of all, the founding of a city. To understand why this spirit has remained so feared for so long, we first need to understand what she represents. In both Indonesian and Malay folklore, Kuntilanak, or Pontianak, is most commonly believed to be the ghost of a woman who died during pregnancy or while giving birth. And that detail matters because it makes her different from many other supernatural figures. She's not simply imagined as evil for no reason. She begins as something tragic. Her story starts with pain, unfinished life, and a death that feels deeply unnatural. She is often portrayed as beautiful or sorrowful from a distance, but deeply unsettling when seen up close. A woman in white, long, dark hair, a face suspended somewhere between sadness and rage. In many stories, she appears in quiet places, near trees, on empty roads, around old houses, or at the edge of villages after dark. And unlike many monsters, she does not feel completely unreal. She feels personal, almost human. And that may be exactly why she has survived so strongly in the imagination of so many people. But what makes this legend especially fascinating is that in one part of Indonesia, Pontianak is not only the name of a ghost, it is also the name of a real city. Pontianak, the capital of West Kalimantan, carries one of the most unusual origin stories in the region. According to local legend, when Sultan Sharif Abdurrahman al-Qadri arrived in the area in the 18th century to establish a new settlement, the land near the Kapuas River was believed to be haunted by supernatural beings. Among them, according to the story, were Pontianak spirits. The forest was not seen as empty land waiting to be built upon. It was seen as a place already occupied by unseen forces. And so, in order to clear the area, the Sultan reportedly ordered his men to fire cannons into the wilderness to drive the spirits away. According to local belief, the places where those cannonballs landed later became the sites of important structures, including the palace and the mosque. And from there, a city was born. Whether or not someone believes that story literally happened is almost beside the point, because what makes it powerful is what it means. Most cities are remembered through trade, war, politics, migration, or geography. But Pontianak, at least in folklore, is remembered through a ghost. Its origin story is not simply about expansion or settlement. It is about confrontation. Human order entering the unknown. Civilization entering wilderness. The living stepping into a place believed to already belong to something else. And that gives the city a very different emotional texture. Suddenly, the forest is not just forest. The river is not just river.
the darkness is not just darkness. Everything becomes part of a supernatural memory. And then there is the name itself. Many believe the word Pontianak may have come from Pontianak, a term long associated with this female spirit in Malay folklore. Some local interpretations even connect it to the idea of a woman who died during childbirth. If that is true, or even if it survives only through belief, it adds another disturbing layer to the story. Because it would mean the city does not merely remember the ghost, it carries her in its name. And once you begin looking at Pontianak that way, the ghost starts to feel less like a random horror figure and more like a cultural symbol. Because legends like this usually do not come from nowhere. They emerge from real fears, real pain, and real patterns in history. And in the case of Kuntilanak, or Pontianak, one of the strongest historical roots may be something brutally simple. Childbirth used to be far more dangerous than most people today fully realize. For much of history, women could die in labor with little warning and very little medical support.
Maternal death was not rare. It was a terrifying possibility woven into ordinary life. And when a woman died in that way, the tragedy would have been emotionally devastating. Because childbirth is supposed to symbolize life, hope, and continuation. But when that moment turns into death, it creates a very specific kind of fear. Life and death arriving at the same time. A mother expected to bring someone into the world, but instead being taken out of it. That kind of event leaves a deep scar on the people around it. And when a society does not have the language, medicine, or emotional framework to fully process such trauma, it often transforms that fear into myth. That is one of the most important things to understand about folklore. Myths are not always false in the way modern people assume. Very often, they are emotional truths expressed through supernatural forms. In other words, a ghost story may not tell you exactly what physically happened, but it can tell you what a society was afraid of. And Kuntilanak seems to embody a very specific fear. The fear of a woman whose death was too painful, too unresolved, and too unnatural to simply disappear. So over time, grief becomes story. Story becomes warning. Warning becomes legend. And legend becomes a ghost that refuses to die. That is what makes Pontianak feel heavier than a typical horror figure. She may not simply represent a haunting. She may represent a society's memory of maternal death itself. This is also why the legend fits into a much larger pattern seen around the world. Across many cultures, there are female spirits tied to sorrow, betrayal, childbirth, or violent death. Women in white, women who cry, women who return, women who do not rest. And almost always, they are connected to something unresolved. Kuntilanak belongs to that tradition, but in Southeast Asia, she carries a particularly local weight. Because she is not only associated with death, she is also associated with wilderness, darkness, silence, and spaces outside social control. She often appears at the edge of order, at the edge of villages, roads, homes, or human safety itself. And symbolically, that matters, because it suggests she is not just a ghost of death, she is also a ghost of what society could not fully explain, fully control, or fully contain. So was Kuntilanak ever real? Maybe that is the wrong question. Because whether or not a literal spirit once drifted through the forests of Kalimantan is not the only truth that matters. The more important truth may be this. Kuntilanak became real the moment she embedded herself into memory, into place, into language,
and into fear. She became real the moment people built warnings around her, the moment parents whispered her name to children, the moment grief and female suffering were transformed into a figure that could be seen, feared, and remembered, the moment a city carried her shadow in its origin story. And in that sense, she may be more real than many things we casually dismiss as fiction. Because some ghosts are not just supernatural beings. Some ghosts are historical emotions that never found closure. And Pontianak, or Pontianak, may be one of the clearest examples of that. She is not simply a woman in white. She is the echo of a society trying to make sense of death. She is the fear of childbirth when childbirth could still kill. She is the anxiety of wilderness before it became city. She is the memory of the feminine transformed into something both tragic and terrifying. And perhaps that is why she still lingers even now. Not because she is hiding somewhere in the dark, waiting to be seen, but because she was never only in the dark to begin with. She was always in the story, in the silence, in the history, in the name. And maybe that is what makes her so frightening after all. Not that she haunts the city, but that she may have helped create it.